Hey there nation, welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander CheapSkate, and we are back with another episode of the Underhive Wars. This is a series of Necromunda battle reports, and this is battle report number 35. It is a standoff scenario that is fought between my two friends, Dark Lord Mac as well as Lady Domina. Dark Lord Mac is bringing Section 8 of the Venators, while Lady Domina is bringing the Killjoys of House Escher. So these two gangs will be throwing it down in a standoff scenario. We're well within our current takeover phase of our Sector 7 turf war, and these two gangs will be throwing it down to see exactly who will continue to dominate territories within Sector 7. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to play some background music real quick. If you want to see exactly what we're bringing for this one, go ahead and pause and take a look at your own leisure. So with that being said, let's get this battle report on a roll. So the scenario rules for this one is standoff. You have standard deployment for this one. Victory conditions that you earn points for each enemy that you put out of action. You earn 3 points for leaders, 2 points for champions, as well as 1 point for everyone else. Whoever has the most points by the end of the scenario is the winner. For the rewards, the winner earns D6 times 10 credits, while the loser earns D3 times 5. For experience, all fighters who participate in the scenario earns +1 to their experience points, while the winning gang leader earns 1 additional experience point for winning the scenario. For reputation, the winner earns 2 points reputation, and since both gangs are fighting against each other for the very first time, both gangs also earn 1 point reputation as well. And of course, if any gang bottles out, they lose 1 point of reputation also. So with the scenario rules over, let's go and talk about the battle plan real quick. So here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see, Dark Lord Mac as well as Lady Domina are deployed on a 4x4 table. We have buildings and ruins on either side of it. We got 2 main avenues approach down the center. We also have a Promethean tank tower right there smack dab in the middle of the battlefield that was recently created by our resident terrain wizard Iron Major, so it's a really awesome looking terrain piece right there as well. Lady Domina is deployed on the near side of the table, while Dark Lord Mac is deployed on the far side of the table as well. And it looks like they're kind of going for kind of like a line formation. We have little fire teams on the left, right, as well as the center portions of the battlefield, and looks like Dark Lord Mac pretty much mirrored the same kind of position on the other side. As for what their actual battle plan is, I really don't know because I didn't really play this game. My two friends were the ones fighting this one. All I did really was just take the pictures for it. So with the battle plan over, let's go and talk about deployment real quick. Alright, so starting off with the Killjoys on the left-hand flank. Up in the front, that is Lucky Lucy. She is a Juve who's got flak armor, a last pistol, shockwick, as well as Kimsynth. Right next to her on the right-hand side, that is Nocturna. She's a ganger who's also equipped with flak armor. She's got a last gun, a stiletto sword, as well as packing Kimsynth. Right there in the middle, that is, I believe that is Marlowe is her name. Marlowe, yeah, that's her name, Marlowe. Marlowe's a Jew who's also got flak armor with last gun. She's got a stub gun and stiletto knife. She's also equipped with a drop rig. She also has dum-dum rounds and Kimsynth. On the left-hand side, that is Harlow. She's another Jew who's armed with flak armor, last gun. She's got a stub gun with dum-dum bullets. She's got a shockwick as well as a drop rig, as well as Kimsynth. And right there on the right-hand side, that is Trixie. She's a gang who's armed with flak armor, a last gun, a chainsword, a last pistol, as well as frag grenades. And that pretty much makes up Lady Domina's left-hand deployment. On the top of the MCI office building with a good overwatch position for the entire battlefield is Lady Domina's champion, that's Mad Donna. She's equipped with mesh armor, she's packing a heavy stubber, last gun, last pistol, as well as a drop rig. She also has suspensors on her heavy stubber as well, so that way she can move and shoot, and she also has dodge skill. And then right next to her on the right hand side, that is One Shot Blonde. She's a gang who's equipped with flak armor, she's got a last gun, last pistol, as well as a drop rig. And finally, in the center of the deployment area is the last 4 remaining members of the Killjoys, little 4-man fire team here. Up in the front, that is Cinder. She's a newly recruited ganger. She's got flak armor as well as a Nightshade Kim Thrower. She's also packing a stub gun with dum-dum rounds. Behind her on the left-hand side, that is Furia. She's the leader who's equipped with mesh armor. She's carrying a combo weapon, which is a combination of a bolter as well as a needle gun. She's also got a chainsword and last pistol. She's got the Kimsynth equipment as well as commanding presence. Right next to her on the right hand side, that is Raven. She's a ganger who's got flak armor, a combo weapon, which is another bolter with a needle rifle attached to it, as well as a chainsword. And to her right hand side, I believe that is Yoko the Pyro is her name. She is a ganger who's equipped with flak armor, a grenade launcher with frag and crack grenades. She's also packing a power sword as well as a drop rig. And that pretty much makes the deployment for the Killjoys for this one. Meanwhile, for the Section 8 of the Venators, on the far right-hand flank of the battlefield, within the Killjoys deployment zone, are two Dramatis Personae. On the left-hand side, that is Grub Tarzan. He's a Hive Scum Dramatis Personae. He's equipped with flak armor. He's got a fighting knife, a shotgun with scatter, as well as execution rounds, as well as frag grenades. He's got the backstab, evade, as well as infiltrate skill. Right next to him on the right-hand side, that is Scabs. He is a Hive Scum Personae as well. He's got flak armor. He's also equipped with plasma gun and stub gun. He's got filter plugs as well. And he's also got the Clamber, Escape Artist, as well as the infiltrate skill. And these guys use their infiltrate ability to pop up about 7 inches away from the Killjoys here within their own deployment area. For the rest of Section 8's deployment, across the battlefield on the far left-hand side, in the back there, that is the Saracen. He is a hunt leader. He's equipped with last pistol, sword, hot shot power pack, armored undersuit, as well as mesh armor. He's got the commanding presence as well as the overseer ability as well. Next to him on the right-hand side, that is Buzzkill. He's a hunter who's equipped with a chainsaw, plasma pistol, mesh armor. He's also suffering from an eye injury. Right next to him on the left-hand side, that is Val the Impaler. He's another hunter who's equipped with a harpoon launcher. He's got a bolt pistol, mesh armor. He's got a humiliating injury. And then up in the front, that is the Kurgan. He's another hunter who's equipped with twin servo claws, and he's also got mesh armor. And in the far right-hand flank of the entirety of the battlefield is the rest of Dark Lord Mac's Venators. Starting at the top there in the back, that is Doolin. He's a hunter who's got the House Goliath legacy. He's equipped with furnace plate and armored undersuit. He's got a brute cleaver as well as a stub cannon. Next to him on the left, that is AWOL Al, who's a hunt champion. He's equipped with mesh armor, an axe, a bolt gun. He's also got the fast shot skill. Right there in the middle, we have another three-man team of hunters. In the front, that is Mayday. She's a hunter who's equipped with mesh armor. She's also packing an axe as well as a las gun. She's also got a spinal injury. Behind her on the right, that is Manchurian Black, who's a hunter. He's also equipped with mesh armor. He's got twin last pistols, frag grenades, as well as an enfeebling injury. Behind them is Red Harvest, who's another hunt champion. He's got a long rifle. He's also equipped with maul. He's got a mesh armor. He's also got the fast shot as well as the clamber skill as well. And then finally, on the bottom left there, on the bottom of this corner, we have another three-man fire team. Up in the front, that is the Pig Killer. He's a hunter who's equipped with mesh armor. He's got a shotgun with solid scatter as well as execution rounds. He's also packing a stub gun and dum-dum rounds. Behind him on the right-hand side, that is the Dramatis Personae bounty hunter Cal Jericho. He's equipped with flak armor, two master-crafted hotshot last pistols, a dueling saber, filter plugs, a strip kit. He's also got the counterattack, gunfighter, inspirational, spring up, as well as step aside skills as well. So that guy's kitted to impress. And then finally, on the left-hand side, that is Redcap Killer. He is a hunt champ. He's equipped with bolt pistol, plasma pistol, mesh armor, and he's also got the gunfighter ability. And that pretty much makes the deployment for Section 8 on this one. So with deployment with both Lady Domina as well as Dark Lord Mac will roll off for initiative to see who will be going first. So with that, we go directly to the top of turn number 1 for the Venators, and Dark Lord Mac manages to go first in this battle report. And for his very first activation, he activates the Dramatis Personae scummer Grub Tarzan, who actually charges directly into Yoko the Pyro as well, which is actually a pretty good move for him because he's got the backstab ability. He's also equipped with the fighting knife, and when you stack those two abilities together, you actually get +2 to your strength. So because of that, he goes directly into Yoko the Pyro and actually attacks her in close combat. Needless to say, he does manage to hit her as well as slip through her armor and put a serious injury on her, so because of that, Yoko the Pyro goes slamming down face first and bleeding on the cold concrete. And instead of just staying there in order to finish off for the next turn, he decides to follow through. So because of that, Grub Tarzan goes directly into Raven, who is the ganger right in the middle there, and decides to engage her in a close combat as well. And that pretty much makes up Dark Lord Mac's very first activation for this turn. However, it was kind of a risky move in order to make that because Lady Domina goes next, so she decides to activate Furia, her gang leader, who then also does a group activation. She also activates Raven, as well as also activating Cinder. So the first thing that she does, of course, is that she charges in with Furia, so that way Furia as well as Raven are both dealing with Grub Tarzan, and they can find them both in close combat. And at the same time, she also moves up Cinder, her normal movement allowance, with her Nightshade Kinthor in order to open fire with her Nightshade Kinthor directly into Scabs, who's actually off screen to the right there. In the end, of course, Grub Tarzan goes out cold for out of action on that one, and that's because Fury was the one that actually managed to put the last wound on him directly. And since he is a Dramatis Personae, and plus he's a Hive Scummer, he doesn't really suffer any lasting injuries. All that ends up happening is that he goes immediately out of action. Unfortunately for Lady Dama, though, when she opened up with Cinder with her Nightshade Chemthor into Scabs, she did manage to hit him, but unfortunately was not able to get his toughness, and the reason why is because Scabs also has filter plugs, which gives him +1 to his toughness as well. So because of that, the shot kind of hit him, but nothing much really happened for that most part. And so with that activation over with, we go directly to Dark Lord Mac's next activation. So with that, Dark Lord Mac does open fire with his plasma gun directly into Cinder and manages to put a grievous injury onto that fighter. So because of that, both Lady Domina as well as Dark Lord Mac have both lost fighters in the opening salvos of turn number 1. So because that, Cinder will go to recovery. She will miss on her next battle report as well. And that makes up the very first basic action that Scabs makes. And for his second action, he actually does a simple movement, moving back 5 inches, right back to behind that little water tower, or to put some distance between himself as well as the rest of the Killjoys. And that pretty much makes up Dark Lord Mac's activation for this turn. So not to be outdone, Lady Dama then activates Mad Donna, her champion, who also does a group activation with one-shot blonde. Basically what she does turn her fighter down, take aim with her heavy stubber, and open fire. So because of that, she opens fire with her heavy stubber all the way across the battlefield. And because she has suspensors on her bolt gun, on her heavy stubber, it doesn't count as a double action to shoot with a heavy weapon. So because that just acts as a normal basic action. So because she took a turn to aim for one of her basic actions, she also gets +1 to hit, which helps mitigate the -1 to hit long range penalty that the heavy stubber gets. And because she did a group activation with Mad Donna, she also activates one-shot blonde, who then uses her drop rig to rappel all the way down to the ground floor from the roof of the MCI office tower. And Mad Donna, of course, opens fires with their heavy stubber, only managed to get one shot off though, and that one shot managed to hit Scabs dead center mass. Unfortunately for Lady Dama though, the shot did not wound, all it did is mainly pin him, so because of that, that is why Scabs laying face up to represent the fact that he got tagged, but he is still perfectly fine. So for his next activation, Dark Lord Mac then activates Red Cap Killer, who then does a group activation with Cal Jericho, and both these characters, of course, do dome movements across the battlefield as quickly as they can, which is actually pretty swift for these guys because Cal Jericho actually moves up 10 inches when he moves, and same thing with Red Cap Killer, he actually moves up 12 inches because he's got movement 6. So these guys goes tearing across the battlefield up the right-hand flank, so that way they can start approaching Scabs because he's all by himself with a bunch of Killjoys surrounding him at this point. For Lady Dama's next activation on the far left-hand flank, she activates her Juvie Marlowe, and actually Marlowe does a double movement forward, moving towards the office building on the left-hand side, getting closer to Section 8 in order to engage those fighters. So for Dark Lord's next activation, then activates the Saracen, who then uses Commanding Presence ability to do a group activation for Val the Impaler, the Kurgan, as well as Buzzkill. The Kurgan actually does a double movement to make it through the window into the first ground level of the office building near the MCI Chemical Take Farm, because that poor guy only has movement of 3. At the same time, he also does a basic movement with Val the Impaler, as well as the Saracen, as well as Buzzkill as well. And all three of those guys actually try to open fire with their pistols directly into Marlowe, who's a little juvie who's kind of partially in the way of the window. Fortunately for Dark Lord Mac, though, Val the Impaler as well as the Saracen actually missed their shots, but Buzzkill does manage to connect with his plasma pistol. And unfortunately for Lady Domina, Marla does go face down with a serious injury, so she's going face down on the ground and bleeding out at this point, and she'll need to roll up at the end phase to see exactly what happens to her. So not to be outdone, Lady Domina then activates Nocturna, who actually spends a basic action to take aim with her last gun, and then takes another basic action in order to open fire with it, getting her +1 to hit, which is actually good considering that the fact that her targets are actually kind of like in partial cover. So she takes aim with her last gun, opens fire directly onto the Kurgan. And this is where things kind of go bad for Dark Lord Mac. Nocturna does manage to hit the Kurgan, which is actually a pretty decent shot considering that she has a +1 to hit on that part. So my buddy Dark Lord Mac, he was actually prepared in order to take the hit on that one. What he was not prepared for, though, was the fact that last gun would wound him, because the Kurgan, I think, is at toughness 5, and Lady Domina's last gun is only at strength 3, and when she rolled for wounding, she actually rolled a 6 on that part. And then, of course, he gets a 5-up armor save. So when Dark Lord Mac rolled for his armor save, he'll actually roll a 1 on that one. So because of that, managed to put a serious injury directly onto the Kurgan. So he gets shot center mass with the last gun and just goes face planting right into the ground, bleeding out at this point. He will need to see exactly what happens to him in the end phase to see how he ends up recovering from his injuries. Meanwhile, across the battlefield on the far right hand side, Dark Lord Mac for his next activation activates Red Harvest, who also does a group activation with Manchurian Black, and both of those fighters do a double movement outside of the Metro Chemicals Tower gateway, making towards this way to the center of the battlefield. So for Lady Domina's next activation, she then activates Lucky Lucy, who actually takes the basic action in order to take aim with her last gun, getting her +1 to hit, and then she spends her second action to open fire with her last gun directly into Buzzkill, who is the closest Venator towards her. And just like last time, not only does she manage to hit Buzzkill, she also rolls a 6 to wound. So because of that, Buzzkill armor also failed his armor save, so he goes crashing to the ground as well with another serious injury. It was the most insane thing we ever saw. Lady Domina rolled 6 to wound both times, and at both times, Dark Lord Mac also failed his armor save as well. So just like that, two of his hunters on his right-hand flank are slowly going to, left-hand flank are going face planted to the ground, and his left flank attack is slowly crumbling for some really accurate pinpoint accuracy shots from blast guns from the Escher gangers, which is actually pretty crazy. And at this point, that Dark Lord Mac's plan kind of starts taking a little bit different approach. Originally, from my understanding, Dark Lord Mac was planning on sending all three of his little fire teams to the right-hand flank and then sweep across the right-hand flank or destroy the Killjoys. But because his left-hand assault is slowly failing him, he decides to activate his fighters and start saving the left-hand flank instead. So for his next activation, he activates AWOL Al, who also does a group activation with his new Venator, Doolin, which is the House Goliath Legacy Bounty Hunter, and those guys make double movements correctly towards the center of the battlefield, making their way to the left-hand edge of the battlefield as well. So up next, Lady Down decides to activate, what's her name? Harlow is her name. She's a Juvie's armed with a last gun. She actually does a double movement to land up right next to Marlowe as well, so that way during the end phase, she can help her out with her recovery rolls, so that way she can get a better recovery chance to get Marlowe back on her feet again. And since the rest of the turn is pretty much dedicated to Lady Domina, she then activates Trixie next. Trixie actually does a basic movement to move up forward, and then she throws a hand grenade, throwing it 9 inches with a frag grenade directly right into the spot between both the Kurgan as well as Buzzkill inside that office building. And to make matters worse, not only that frag grenade actually lands right smack dab in the middle between the two of them, it also goes off and wounds both of them as well. Dark Lord Mac unfortunately failed his armor save for both of his hunters, so because of that, they have to roll serious injuries. And when he rolled serious injuries for both of them, he rolled 2 out of action results, which was absolutely horrifying for him. The first after-action result was a critical injury put directly onto Buzzkill, so because of that, at the end of the battle report, Dark Lord Mac will need to roll up on the medical escort mission to see exactly what ends up happening to his fighter, whether he lives, dies, or gets a serious lasting injury put on him one more time. At the same time, the Kurgan also suffers a grievous injury as well when he goes out of action, so he goes directly into recovery, and he will mess out on his next battle report. And at the same time, he also suffered a flesh wound too, which was pretty horrific for him. Alright, so with the action phase over, we go directly to the end phase, and the first thing we do is we roll for Marlowe. Marlowe ends up rolling a flesh wound, so because that Juvie gets right back on her feet again, and this time she also is supported by Harlow at the same time. And unfortunately for Lady Domina, when she rolled for Yoko the Pyro, even with the assist from Raven as well as Furia, she still rolled 2 serious injury results. So because of that, she's still laying on the ground, and she is also still bleeding out as well. Both of my friends, of course, ignore taking bottle roll tests because they have not lost enough fighters in order to trigger that ability yet. And with that, that brings us to the end of turn number 1 for this battle report. So here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield at the end of turn number 1. As you can see, the Killjoys are pretty much focused on the left-hand flank, starting to take apart the 4-man fire team of the Saracen, Buzzkill, the Kurgan, as well as Val the Impaler, and Lady Domina started to push in on the left-hand side. At the same time, she also has a couple of fighters on the right-hand side as well as the center as well. Now, Dark Lord Mac's initial plan to assault on the right-hand flank is slowly being adjusted as he's sending a couple of his fire teams on the left-hand flank now in order to send some support for the Saracen as well as his kill team, his fire teams, which are being taken apart by the Killjoys with some really good accurate firing from their last rifles. So with that being said, that ends up turn number 1, and we go directly to the top of turn number 2, and both Lady Domina as well as Dark Lord Mac roll off for initiative to see who goes first. So with that, it takes us directly to the top of the turn number 2 for the House Escher this time, so the Killjoys will be going first. Lady Domina managed to get the priority on this one. And the first thing she does another group activation with her leader Furia, and she uses her commanding presence ability to both activate Raven as well as Yoko the Pyro. The first thing she actually does, she actually sends Yoko the Pyro as well as Raven moving backwards behind that sheet wall of corrugated steel so that they could take cover from any incoming fire that they might receive coming from Section 8 across the battlefield. At the same time, she also does a basic movement action with her leader Furia, who actually goes up her normal movement allowance on the other side of the water tower for the right-hand side of the table. She then opens up with her bolt gun directly into Scavs. Imagine hitting him all 3 times, actually putting 6 damage on him right off the bat, putting an out cold result on that fighter as well. So because of that, Scavs goes directly into recovery, and with that being said, the Section 8 loses another fighter, and Dark Lord Mac is down one of his special characters for his gang. So with that, we jump across the battlefield to Dark Lord Mac's very first activation. So he activates the Saracen, who also does a group activation for Val the Impaler. Both those characters actually open fire. The Saracen actually takes a basic action to aim with his last pistol and open fire with his hotshot last pistol, while at the same time Val the Impaler opens with his harpoon gun. Because it's a heavy weapon, it takes a double action in order to shoot that. In the end, Val the Impaler was able to manage to hit as well as wound Trixie, also dragging her forward 6 inches forward directly into the office building at the same time as well. And with Trixie out of the way, and since she's down, the nearest fighter after that was Nocturna. And as you can see in this photo, the Saracen did manage to hit Nocturna with his hotshot last pistol. Unfortunately for them, the only thing he was able to do was pause a flesh wound. So because of that, Nocturna is both pinned, as also bleeding out too, with a flesh wound counter put on her. So because of that, she loses 1 point of toughness. It makes it a little bit easier to wound at the same time. So in response to that, Lady Dama then activates Mad Donna, who then also takes a basic action aim with her heavy stubber and open fire directly across the battlefield to the nearest target, when this happens to be Doolin, which is on the other side of the battlefield right next to that rubble pile. So when Lady Domina rolled on the Firepower dice for Mad Donna, she only rolled an additional hit, so because of that, both those shots do manage to hit Doolin. Unfortunately for Lady Domina, though, she does not manage to actually cause any wounds. His armor save actually absorbed the shots for both of those, and the reason why is because he's wearing Furnace Plate with a armor undersuit on that as well, so because his armor save is 5 up, and when he's being hit from the front, he gets an additional armor save bonus put on top of that, making it to a 4 up armor. So it gets negated from the -1 AP from the heavy stubber, giving him a 5 up armor, and he actually rolled a 5 and a 6 as well, so because that Doolin is just pinned right now, and aside from that, he is perfectly fine. So for Dark Lord Mac's next activation is another group activation with Red Harvest, so if he's over there on the other side of the battlefield. He actually takes a turn in order to take aim with his long rifle, and then he opens up with his long rifle, getting a +1 to hit directly into Madonna, who's weirdly enough the closest target to him that he actually visibly see. At the same time, he also moves up Manchurian Black 8 inches forward through the rubble pile, head directly to the Promethean tank right in the middle of the battlefield. And not only does he manage to hit Mad Donna, he also manages to wound her as well, causing her to get herself a flesh wound as well as a serious injury. So because of that, she's laying face down on the ground, bleeding out for the most part. And because of the knockback roll, she does go back 1 inch, but luckily for Lady Donna, though, Mad Donna did pass her initiative test. So because of that, she still remains on the roof of the MCI office tower, because had she failed that initiative test, she would have plummeted her something like 3 stories straight down the bottom, and probably would have gotten out of action as a result of that. So with Lady Dama's next activation, she activates Lucky Lucy. He spends a simple action to move 6 inches forward into the office building, getting within 3 inches of Val the Impaler. And then she does a basic action in order to attack him in close combat. And the reason why she's able to do that is because the Juvie is equipped with a shock whip, and it's got a 3-inch range on it because it's got the versatile ability of weapon straight on that weapon as well. She does manage to hit as wound Val the Impaler, but unfortunately for her, though, the only thing she was able to do was put a flesh wound on him. So because of that, Val the Impaler is still on his feet, he's just a little bit easier to wound now, which is unfortunate for Lady Dama because Val the Impaler can still be kind of deadly because he can still shoot and he can still fight. For Dark Lord Mac's next activation, he activates AWOL Al, who also does a group activation with Doolin. Doolin gets back on his feet again and moves up his normal moon allowance of 4 inches, while AWOL Al does a double move right behind those chemical tanks right there in the middle of the battlefield in order to take some cover from that long-range fire from Mad Donna and her heavy stubber. So, Lady Dama continues her advance on the left-hand side. She then activates Harlow next, who actually moves up 6 inches, and the Juvie opens up the last gun, firing through the window through the ground level of the office building directly into Val the Impaler. She does manage to hit Val the Impaler and manages to put a pin on him as well, but unfortunately for her, though, she wasn't able to wound, so because of that, Val the Impaler is still perfectly fine. He's just pinned right now because he's being shot out with the last rifle. Meanwhile, on the far right-hand side of the battlefield, Dark Lord Max continues on with his assault to the right-hand flank. He once again does a double move for both Redcap Killer as well as Cal Jericho. Both guys move up 12 inches as well as 10 inches respectively. As you can see, now they're all the way across the table in the Lady Domina's deployment area for the Killjoys, making their way along the right-hand side to start attacking the Killjoys in their own deployment area. So Lady Dama continues on her advance to the left-hand flank as well. She does a simple action to get Nocturna back on her feet again to escape pinning, and then she also moves up her normal moon allowance to move up right next to Trixie, so that way she should lend aid to Trixie during the recovery phase, so that way she can choose the better of 2 injury dice rolls to see exactly what happens to her fighter who is seriously injured at this point. And on the right-hand flank, Dark Lord Mac continues his right-hand assault by also moving up the Pit Killer, who also moves up a double moon allowance of 8 inches forward in order to catch up with Cal Jericho as well as Redcap Killer. So for one of her last activations, Lady Dama then activates Marlowe, who is the Juvie's arm with the last gun. She actually spends a basic action in order to aim with the last gun, getting her a +1 to hit, and also spending her second basic action to open fire with her last gun as well. And while she did manage to hit the Saracen, unfortunately for her though, she did fail to wound him, so because of that, the Saracen is simply pinned right now, and he's just laying on the ground trying to dodge the incoming laser gun fire that is actually being fired through those windows directly into him. And because the only fighter who has any fighters left on the battlefield is Lady Domina, she then spends her last activation on One Shot Blonde. One Shot Blonde does a double movement across her deployment zone to the right hand side in order to help lend some aid to both Raven as well as Yoko the Pyro and Furia in order to deal with Red Cap Killer as well as Cal Jericho, who are starting to assault on the right hand deployment area. And with that, that pretty much ends the action phase for turn number 2. So with the action phase over, we go directly to the end phase. And during the end phase for the recovery roll for Trixie, she managed to get a flesh wound off on her, so because that, Trixie's back on her feet again with a flesh wound counter. She is a little bit easier to win now because she's lose 1 point to her toughness, but she could still fight, she could still shoot, so she's still pretty much a deadly force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. And luckily for Lady Domina, Mad Donna also gets back on her feet as well. She also suffers another flesh wound as well, so she has 2 flesh wound counters on her, meaning that she's only toughness 1 at this point. If she suffers another flesh wound, she will automatically go out of action with a lasting injury result roll as well. And unfortunately for Lady Domina, Yoko the Pyro is still seriously injured. She's still out of action, not out of action, I'm sorry. She's still on the ground, just bleeding out at this point, still trying to recover and trying to get back on her feet again. So with the recovery rolls over for the end phase, we go directly to the bottom of turn number 2. So here's an overhead shot of the entirety of turn number 2. As you can see, Lady Domina is starting to spread her forces kind of thinned out in the middle. She's actually concentrating forces on the left as well as the right hand flank of the battlefield to deal with the 2 assault groups of Venators are coming in both directions at the same time, which is also kind of risky as well because it leaves her center kind of exposed. But at the same time though, Dark Lord Mac is not sending his forces down the straightaway of the middle of the battlefield. What he's doing instead is he's sending his forces to the left hand flank and the right hand flank as well, trying to outmaneuver Lady Domina at the same time. And that pretty much makes up the action phase as well as end phase for turn number 2. So with the end phase over with, we go directly to the top of turn number 3, and both Dark Lord Mac and Lady Domina roll up for initiative to see who will go first for priority. Alright, so that takes us directly to the top of turn number 3 for the Venators this time, with Dark Lord Mac taking the priority on this one. And the first thing he does another group activation. He activates Red Harvest, who then also does a group activation with Mayday as well. Mayday actually spends a double action moving forward, moving up 8 inches towards the right hand flank as well, running down the center area, because it seems like a pretty safe place to stay. At the same time, he also activates Red Harvest, who then takes a basic action to take aim with his long rifle, and another basic action to open fire with it. This time, once again, targeting the heavy stubber wielding Mad Donna, who's all the way across the other side of the battlefield. And not only does he manage to hit her, he also puts another serious injury on her again, so because that Mad Donna goes crashing face down to the ground, it also starts bleeding out as well. And once again, Lady Donna was very lucky. She did manage to pass her initiative test, so because of that, Mad Donna managed to stay on the roof of the building still, in spite of the fact of being hit with a long rifle at the same time. But at the same time, though, things for Mad Donna are not looking very good. In worst case scenario, she just rolls another flesh wound and she goes out of action and suffers a lasting injury, or she rolls an out of action result and also suffers a lasting injury again, or she rolls a serious injury, in which case Mad Donna just stays on the ground bleeding out. So for all intents and purposes, Mad Donna is pretty much done with this battle report. So for Lady Domina's very first activation, she also activates Lucky Lucy again, who does move another 6 inches, curving right behind Val the Impaler, and she also attacks one more time with her shock whip as well. Once again, managing to hit him as well, and unfortunately for her though, did not manage to put a wound on him for the most part. So because of that, he just kind of pinned down right now on the ground, just not much of anything happening because she kind of failed to hit him with her shock whip. So not much is taking place over there. In response, Dark Lord Mac then activates the Saracen, who does a group activation with Val the Impaler. The Saracen actually moves back for a basic action behind that rubble wall there in order to take some cover. At the same time, Val the Impaler pops up on his feet and opens fire with his bolt pistol. Now, usually when you escape pinning and you open fire with a gun, you actually get a 360-degree vision arc, but you suffer a -2 to hit penalty to represent the fact that you're just getting up on your feet and just kind of shooting wildly in order to panic fire in order to stop being shot at. But because he's using a bolt pistol, he does get a +2 to hit because he's within short range. So because of that, that +2 pretty much mitigates the -2 to hit penalty for blind firing, and he aims directly into Lucky Lucy there. So he opens fire with his bolt gun directly into her. Not only does he manage to hit Lucky Lucy, he also manages to put a serious injury on her as well. So because of that, Lucky Lucy goes crashing face down to the ground, and she is bleeding out as well, which is a very precarious spot for her to be in, because if she gets charged at by Val the Impaler or the Saracen, they can finish her off with a coup de grace, and she'll go out of action as well. Or in the worst case scenario, she actually goes out of action in the recovery phase, or she could suffer another serious injury, or she of course suffers another flesh wound. I mean, it's really just up to the dice at this point. So with that, Lady Dama then activates Trixie next, who then spends a basic action to take aim with her last gun and another basic action to open fire with it, giving her +1 to hit. And oddly enough, the closest target to her isn't Val the Impaler or the Saracen. Because the way the Saracen and Val the Impaler are kind of located, they're no longer within line of sight of her, so she really can't shoot. So the closest target to her is AWOL Al, who's in the middle of the battlefield. So the cool part was she was able to hit AWOL Al, but unfortunately for her though, she did not manage to cause a wound at all. So because of that, AWOL Al is just pinned at this point. So not much really happens there for the shooting at that point. So for Dark Lord X activation, he decides to activate AWOL Al, who does a group activation with Doolin. Doolin does a double movement to the left-hand side of 8 inches in order to support the Saracen as well as Val the Impaler, who are being overran on the left-hand flank. At the same time, AWOL Al gets back on his feet again with a simple action. He does a blind fire with his bolt gun as well. And the reason why he's able to do so is because he's got the fast shot ability, which treats all shooting like simple actions, so because of it, he can shoot still. Now, granted, he does suffer a -2 to hit penalty, but because he's within the short-range distance of Trixie, who is the closest target to him, he actually suffers a -1 to hit against because of the +1 bonus from the bolt gun being fired at short range. With the rapid fire dice, he actually manages to get 2 shots off. One misses, but the second one does manage to hit Trixie, which puts a serious injury on her as well as a flesh wound. So because of that, Trixie is now face down with 2 flesh wounds on her as well, reducing her to toughness 1, which is a really bad spot for Trixie to be in, because if she rolls another flesh wound result for recovery, she goes out of action because she has no more toughness at that point. If she rolls an out of action result, of course, she'll also have a lasting injury from that as well. The best case scenario for Lady Dama is so hopefully she rolls a serious injury again for Trixie, so all she does is just kind of lays on the ground, kind of bleeding out without much happening as well, which is kind of like the same exact thing that happened to Mad Donna, who's the champion armed with the heavy stubber. So things are not looking very good for Lady Dama at this point. The tide is slowly turning in favor for the Venators of Section 8. To make matters worse, Lady Domina has to take a panic check for Nocturna because she is really close to Trixie at the same time when she got shot. She was in 3 inches, and unfortunately for her, she failed a cool test. She runs back 8 inches, running for cover at the same time. So because of that, she won't be able to take any of their reactions into the end phase until she recovers her nerve, unfortunately. So Lady Dama then activates Harlow, her Juve, who once again takes a basic action to aim with her last gun, getting her +1 to hit bonus, and take another basic action to open fire onto Val the Impaler. And the crazy part is she does manage to hit Val the Impaler, but unfortunately, once again, she was unable to wound him at the same time. So because of that, Val the Impaler is currently pinned at this point with not much anything else pretty much happening to him. Meanwhile, on the far right-hand flank of the battlefield, Dark Lord Mac then activates the Pig Killer, who does a double action to move forward 8 inches on the other side of the Quantum Building, catching with both Cal Jericho as well as Red Cap Killer. And Marla Juvie actually does a double movement forward, moving up right next to Trixie as well. She won't be able to shoot anything because she does a double movement forward, but she is within range to end some friendly assistance during the recovery phase, so that way she can kind of choose a more beneficial injury result during the recovery phase. Meanwhile, on the far right-hand flank within Lady Dama's deployment area, both Cal Jericho as well as Red Cap Killer actually do a group activation. Red Cap Killer does a group activation with Cal Jericho. Cal Jericho actually does a 10-inch movement to the left-hand side, moving right directly into the middle of the water tower area, taking some cover behind those water tanks. At the same time, Red Cap Killer does a basic action move forward and another basic action to open fire with his 2 guns. He's equipped with a bolt pistol as well as a plasma pistol, and since he has a gunfighter rule, he can actually fire both of those weapons without suffering any penalties. And he opens fire with both those weapons directly into Raven. Furia, which is the gang leader there on the bottom left-hand corner. Now, while she was able to stop the bolt gun from actually wounding her, unfortunately, the plasma pistol had no problem going through her armor. It ends up with a out cold result and going directly out of action. So because of that, Lady Domina does lose her leader, and also netting 3 victory points for the Venators at this point because of the standoff rules. So things are looking very bad for Lady Domina at this point. However, not to be outdone by the Venators, Lady Dama then activates Raven, who spends a basic action to take aim with her bolt gun, and she fires it aiming directly at Mayday, who's all the way across on the other side of the battlefield, taking another basic action to shoot her bolt gun. And because of that, to make matters worse, she put a grievous injury directly onto Mayday. She was able to do that because when she rolled her rapid fire dice, she actually rolled 3 hits. So all 3 shots managed to hit Mayday for 1, and all 3 shots managed to wound her as well. And when she went to roll to see exactly how many injury dice she ended up with, I think she rolled up something like 4 or 5 flesh wounds. So because of that, Mayday goes directly out of action, losing all of her toughness at the same time, and she also goes to recovery as well, and she will miss out her next battle report as she is recovering from her injuries. And for Dark Lord Mac's last activation, he then activates Manchurian Black, who does a double movement to move directly into the middle of the courtyard of the Promethean Tower, right in the middle of the battlefield. And for Lady Domina's last activation, she moves a double move forward with One-Shot Blonde, who also goes on the other side of Raven as well, to let some support from the assault coming from the right-hand flank from both Red Cap Killer as well as Cal Jericho. So with the action phase over with, you go directly to the recovery phase. And during the end phase, unfortunately for Lady Domina, she rolls an out cold result for her Trixie as well. So because of that, Trixie does go out of action. The only silver lining of this, of course, is that she skips recovery because she was just knocked out for the battle. Meanwhile, Lucky Lucy also gets back on her feet again as well with a flesh wound, so because of that, she is only toughness 1, which makes her considerably easier to injure, but at the same time though, she can still shoot, she can still fight, and she is an Escher, and as we all know, Eschers can be deadly in close combat. And once again, tragedy strikes again for Mad Donna this time, who ends up with an out cold result. When Lady Domina rolled for a recovery, she actually rolled another flesh wound, so because of that, she drops to 0 toughness and she goes out with an out cold result. So once again, the silver lining being she doesn't have to go to recovery, she'll just make a full recovery, no problem whatsoever. And once again, the Yoko the Pyro is still seriously injured, just laying on the ground, just bleeding out for the most part, not doing much of anything for most of this battle report because of the mean backstab she took from Grub Tarshan. He must have severed an artery or hit her in the spine or something because she hasn't recovered at all during this entire battle report. And finally, Lady Donna does manage to recover with Nocturno, manage to recover her nerve again, and so she turns 180 in order to fight again once again, and also at the same time netting herself a point of experience while doing so. And that pretty much ends turn number 3 on this one. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we go directly to the end of the game with the Venators sneaking a victory on this one. Lady Donna decided to voluntarily bottle out this point because I think she's lost, 7 points is what she ends up losing so far, as opposed to the 5 that the Venators have actually lost, and she doesn't really want to lose any more members of her gang, so because of that, she pretty much throws the battle report at this point. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go directly to the post-game because this battle report is now officially over. Alright, so up first we talk about the Killjoys in this one. Further injuries, they actually suffered quite a bit of injuries on this one. Furia, Mad Donna, Trixie, as well as Harlow all rolled an out cold result for their injuries. Now, originally Harlow had a grievous injury, but the gang decided to use their Stinger Mold Sprawl territory in order to heal her instead. So because of that, Harlow only suffered an out cold result, and she makes a full recovery as well. So they got pretty lucky considering all the injuries that they took in this battle report. For advancements, actually a couple of the Killjoys actually advanced up, leveled up quite considerably. Trixie, Nocturna, Marlowe, Harlow, as well as Lucky Lucy all leveled up as well, earning +1 to their cool stats and also increasing their value by 10 credits. At the same time, Raven also leveled up to +1 to her movement as well, so now Raven actually has movement 7 now. So she is lightning quick, being able to move across the battlefield as quickly as she can, which is pretty awesome as well. From their territories, from their settlement, they earned 1 point of reputation as well as 30 credits, and they also managed to recruit a new ganger for free named Sister Christian, which is pretty cool as well. From their Stinger Mold Sprawl, they managed to earn 1 point of reputation from that, and with that, of course, they managed to heal Cinder with her out cold result instead of a grievous injury as before, so that part was kind of nice too. From their Synth Still, they also earned a +1 point of reputation from that as well. Now, they did lose this battle, so because they do lose their territory, but luckily for Lady Donna though, she also had a Wasteland as one of her territories, so because of that, when she had to give it up, she actually just gave the useless and worthless piece of territory to Section 8 instead, which is pretty ironic because, you know, better than that than any one of her valuable territories, which is actually kind of cool. During the trading post as well as merchant phase, she earned 40 credits total from the scenario as well as from her settlement. With her 40 credits, she decided to purchase a last gun, a last pistol, as well as a stiletto knife for her brand new recruited ganger, Sister Christian. She then took the 5 remaining credits that she had left over and put that directly into the stash. For her reputation, she earned 3 points reputation from her territories as well as 1 point from fighting against Section 8 for the very first time, but because she bought out as well, she loses 1 point of reputation, and that brings her grand total to 21 points reputation in total. Her new record now is at 3 wins as well as 3 losses, and her new gang rating is at 1,925 points. And finally for Section 8, for the injuries, they actually suffered 3 injuries on this one. The Kurgan as well as Mayday all suffered grievous injuries, so they will miss out the next battle report because of it. Buzzkill, however, suffered a critical injury, and when they rolled up for the result for the medical escort mission, he actually rolled a dead result, so because of that, all of his equipment goes directly in the stash, and Buzzkill bites the dust at this point. And once again, these Venators of Section 8 kind of have a moment of silence for their dead friend. For their advancements, Manchurian Black actually leveled up to level 2, earning +1 to his toughness. Now he's toughness 4, which is actually pretty cool. Also increases his value for his gang by 30 credits as well. From their territories, from their settlement, they earn 1 point of reputation from their settlement as well as 10 credits. And they also recruited 2 new hunters for brand new. They actually rolled 2 6s to see if they recruit anybody. Those 2 hunters are named Gregor Graves as well as Hacksaw Harry. From their Needleways, of course, they don't get any enhanced reputation from that. But because they purchased a House Delac legacy for the Saracen during the merchant phase, they actually now have an enhanced boon for their Needleways, which means now that 2 groups of 3 fighters can now infiltrate in starting on round 2, which is actually pretty good for the Venators at this point. Makes it a little bit more sneakier to over-envelop their enemies. And of course, because they defeated the Killjoys, they actually captured a brand new piece of territory, which was a wasteland, which is nothing, and that doesn't give them any bonuses or anything whatsoever. So that part was kind of rough. The only good news is that if they should lose any territories in the next battle report, they can use that to be the piece of territory that they lose. So that part's kind of nice. For the merchant phase, they actually earned 110 credits from the scenario as well as 10 credits from their settlement, giving a grand total of 120 credits. With those 120 credits, they actually purchased meshed armor, a bolt pistol, as well as a shock stave for Hunter Gregor Graves, which is one of the new ones they recruited from their settlement. And at the same time, they gave Buzzkill's meshed armor, chainsword, and plasma pistol to the new hunter Hacksaw Harry. So because that he's carrying Buzzkill's gear as well. They also purchased a House Delac legacy for the Saracens. So now every single time they capture any new territories, they have House Delac territories, they get enhanced boons. And they also still retain the services of both Cal Jericho as well as Scabs, which is actually kind of nice. For the reputation, they earn 2 points reputation from the scenario as well as 1 point from their territories, bringing their grand total to 24 points reputation. Their new record now is at 5 wins and 4 losses, and their new gang ranking is at 2,765 points. So that's good to do for this one, you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest greatest hobby news on this channel. That's good to do for this one, you guys. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.